Call this Thursday, April 13th, 2023, of the meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Tonight we'll be following the published and posted agenda. We'll be providing both in-person and Zoom attendance. If you're in the Zoom room, please, I ask that if you want to speak during public comment, that you raise your hand. Please note for the record, Pam, that participating from the Zoom room is John Tebow. First item on our agenda this evening is approval of minutes. We have 7 minutes from March 30th, 2023. Has everyone had an opportunity to review them?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion that we accept the meeting notes as presented.
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
John's dropped out, so that's a five with 2 absent. All right. Next on our agenda, we have public comment. Anyone in the public like to speak before we start in this evening? If you're here to speak specifically on an article, we'll hear you then. All right. Hearing none, we'll move right ahead to review and discussion on the vote of recommendations for the fiscal year 2024 Spring Annual Town Meeting Articles 2 and 3.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee, and those watching. I'm Paul Cohen, Town Manager. Since you last met and sort of concluded your hearings in March, we have 2 articles that were have advanced. They were presented last Monday evening, 3 nights ago, to the Select Board, and we'd respectfully ask for your consideration this evening. When we were last here, the first one was, as Darlene Lucy was here, we explained that we reach out to department heads to figure out what do we need for the last 3 months of the fiscal year to make sure that we close the year, with no issues. Our town accountant, Darlene Lucia, reached out with the department heads. John Souza, our finance director, who's here this evening, but he just stepped out for a moment, and I sort of, gathered and worked with those. And per typical, we have a couple of adjustments, and generally they tend to be in the traditional areas. And so and I just want to explain that for the funding source, I'm utilizing the Finance Committee Reserve Fund, and the reason for that is the intent, that if there were not a town meeting, we'd use the reserve fund, but since we have a town meeting, we respect the will of the voters and the input, so we go to the town meeting, but use that as the funding source. So with that being the case, under Article 2, we're seeking to amend the current fiscal year operating budget with 3 line items. The first one is line item number 5, public safety expenses, in the amount of $127,000. The second one is line item 9, municipal facilities personnel services at $41,500. And then third one, final one is line item 10, municipal facilities expenses for $78,000. That totals up to $246,500. And on the next slide, you'll see sort of a little bit of breakdown of again, these are items that arose during the year that weren't known or foreseen when a year ago we were presenting the budget for the current fiscal year. And for the public safety expenses, it pertains to the police and fire departments, which are the bulk of that budget line item. And the first one, the police department, is we've had a recruitment of a number of officers, and in this case, total of 5. We know people are eligible for retirement, like Chief Spinney, but we don't know when they may elect to retire, and some give you advance notice, like the chief did, and others give you shorter notice. And the challenge is, as the chief explained, is to put a new officer on the street, it takes almost 3/4 of a year. Because we have to get the officers off the civil service list. You then got to bring them in, interview them, testing, background, get them into an accredited academy, and then graduate from that academy. So we've had recruitment of 5 officers in this past year, which again is a little bit above the norm, and so that really was an extraordinary expense there. And then the issues of building repairs with the new police station, or the police station, which is now a generation old, we've had some building repairs, again, back to the facilities theme, including the furnace in that building, and then the parking lot repairs. Remember, that's a parking lot now that's now utilized not only by the police department, but by Public Works and the fire department, because that's our only fuel pumps. And then they also, with the police reform, they updated the use of force module for the department, and then they did do an upgrade to their firearms. In the fire department, you'll see the themes are vehicle maintenance. Again, fire apparatus is running $900,000 per purchase for a new apparatus. And what we've seen, much like if you with home auto repair and dealers and so forth, the cost of vehicle maintenance has increased. So he anticipates an overage in that budget of $56,000. The other item was diesel fuel. Unlike gasoline, which we saw sort of fall, and given our forecast a year ago what fuel would be, diesel fuel has stayed persistently and stubbornly high. And so we're over in that budget by $26,000 because that is basically what operates most of the fire fleet is diesel. And then utilities for $10,000, and then miscellaneous building maintenance, he thinks will be over about $5,000. So those are the overages on the public safety expenses. On the next slide is municipal facilities. And there's two categories there. One is in terms of personnel, and one is in terms of expenses. And again, we're seeing this theme, and you see it across. The issue is in personnel is, being able to retain and recruit and so forth. And in this case, it was recruiting and retaining. In both cases, we recruited them, we wanted to keep them. An HVAC technician, which has been a real struggle in this thing. So there was a $10,000 overage there in terms of the employment there. And then we also utilized the facilities personnel to remove some of the old fire departmental, old manual fire alarm system. And that was done primarily, we were in coordination. Some aspects we were able to do at National Grid, because when they were doing the relocation of their substation, and again, I'll credit the public works director and the department, they were able to, and fire chief, they were able to work with National Grid to partner with them to have, when those poles were being reset and replaced, to take the fire alarm down. But there were other areas that we needed to remove the fire alarm cable ourselves outside of that project area. And again, just overall changes in personnel, and we had a couple of retirements in there. And what happens is with the retirements come the payoff of accrued time. And then there was also overtime related to an unforeseen repair of the catch basins at schools. So that sort of was the personnel aspects of it. And then on the facility side, the overage is with the Roberts Fields project, which we're wrapping up. And again, we ran into some unforeseen issues with drainage out there. And then the most recent one is I shouldn't smile, but we're having to install the benches for the Little League fields. And so again, there's just work that was foreseen, and just needed to be done in terms of sort of the turnover on the project. So again, everything is wrapping up there. The fields are now being used, and like anything else, there are issues that arose that weren't foreseen a year ago when we were preparing this budget. So those are the adjustments that we have to the operating budget. Overall, as Darlene noted to you, and she'll be reporting to the select board next month, we're finishing the year strong, and again, it's just the nature of government that you forecast the best you can when you prepare the budgets, and then reality sets in. So that's the summary of Article 2.
Okay. Can I ask,
Sure.
do we have a running total of how much has been spent with Roberts Field?
We have.
Field,
Yeah, the whole project is one.
including playground?
Yeah.
1.2.
Yeah, it's over $1.2 million, including the playground. You go back to that whole
Yeah.
project. That was, but and in fact, I spoke with Bill Askenberg this morning that the project always has additional phases that he's seeking to get funding for, and in fact, he may be reaching out to our state reps trying to get some assistance for that, because there are subsequent phases for that. But to date, including going back to the playground, it's about $1.25 million.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Any questions?
But that's community preservation funds too, right? Or,
Yes, some of it is community preservation, but then, like I said, we've done a lot of forced labor account and other work over there with drainage, irrigation lines, and so forth. I mean, it's been sort of all in on that project, and I think like many of our efforts, it sort of expands over time as further we get into that project.
well, it is beautiful.
Yeah.
As a
Yeah.
neighbor,
Yeah.
I appreciate it very much, and I'm sure others in town, the whole town, enjoys it.
Okay, well, we move on to Article 3.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Article 3 is funding for collective bargaining agreements. Previously, I presented to you the police patrol agreement, which is here as well, but nothing like a deadline to spur action to reach closure. And since we last met together in this room, we reached agreement with the police superior officers for a 6-year contract period, going back 3, the current year and the next 2. I mentioned we have the police patrol agreement for the current year and the upcoming 2, the public safety dispatchers, and the library employees. And then I also joined in a meeting 2 nights ago with the school committee for their final collective bargaining agreement with the school custodians. So at this point in time, every one of the town's unions has an agreement that goes at least through FY25, with the exception of the firefighters union. We had a mediation session yesterday, and that's just going to be ongoing at this point. So, but everything else is good and in place. And so these agreements that I'm presenting to you have been ratified both by the union membership and by the select board this last Monday evening. So we'll start off with the police superior officers labor agreement. And sort of as a introductory remarks on the labor agreements themselves, this is a very challenging time for labor. I mean, as we know, we there's a labor shortage in Massachusetts and really the country. And what we're seeing is at the low end of the pay scale, in particular, with entry-level workers, whether they're paraprofessionals in the schools, library workers, what have you, the initial parts of the pay scale are proving the most difficult to employ. And again, it's issues now of, being able to retain and attract workers. So agreements that we see sort of aren't in sync with ours, that go like a year or 2 out, that we see in some of our comparable communities, we know today those agreements, could not be attained because everything is timing, as we know in the world. So going back now to the specifics of the labor agreement with the Police Superior Officers Union, the fiscal years 20 and 22 that you see up on the screen, the 3%, 2%, 2%, that is in keeping with the pattern of settlement for that period across the community. So that was a quick in and out. We got it done, 3, 2, and 2. And so that stands alone as an agreement. Then we went to the bigger challenge was, okay, what about the current year and the upcoming 2 years? And as you'll see in the next slide, that's a longer and more detailed description and much more similar to what you see with the other groups, because we sort of focused on, where we are today and going to tomorrow. And again, they're all 3-year agreements. And the compensation level was 2.5% per year for the 3 years. But then we had to, and you'll see this in the others, we made an adjustment to the market in terms of 2 markets. One is, how do we pay comparable within our community in terms of the upper and lower ranks? So in the case of a police superior officer, it's like, well, what are you paying the lieutenants above them, and then what are you paying the patrol below them? And then you also have the comparable market of, well, what are the sergeants earning in comparable towns, such as Barica, Tewksbury, and Drake, and so forth. So we made an adjustment and agreed to $1.75 per hour, plus 2.5% the first year, and then 2.5% the subsequent 2 years. And then we also made some adjustments to some of the miscellaneous parts of the contract. And why we look at that is what we look at is, it's not just, you can't just look at, what's the hourly rate. We'll look at what's the compensation. In other words, what does a person receive every other paycheck or every other week when they get their paycheck? So we grid it out. We look at, well, what's the hourly rate? What do they get for longevity? What do they get for educational incentive? What do they get for shift differential, and so forth? So that's why you say, well, why are these things of like $10 and so forth? Because we do want to be competitive. And of course, they want to be competitive on their end. So in this case, the officer in charge increased by $10 a shift. So in the event, on those occasions when there's not a lieutenant available to work and the sergeant is the officer on duty, he would get an extra $10 for that shift. The issue of extra pay details on holidays, the request was, and we're seeing this as a trend, on those dates of the legal holidays, and we would increase them to 2 times the hourly rate as opposed to time and a half. It really doesn't occur tremendously often, particularly for the town doing detail work. But in other words, if somebody has to do a detail on New Year's, Christmas, Thanksgiving, those are the 4th of July and so forth. So those are the holidays. And then, of course, like all groups, we're now catching up to the state's legislation and adding Juneteenth as a holiday. And you'll see that in the other agreements. The next slide shows the educational incentive. In this, again, this is a competitive aspect, and this language and provision was already in the patrol officers agreement, because years ago, as we were adding entry-level officers, we had other towns who maintained the traditional, what was known as the Quinn Bill or educational incentive from the Commonwealth, despite the Commonwealth defunding it back in 2012. So that was done in prior contract with the patrol officers. It never arose till the current time with the sergeants, because all those people who were sergeants had been grandfathered under the previous statute until now. So we have one sergeant who no longer is grandfathered. And again, our comparable towns have that. And again, in the sake of fairness and in reflecting the market, we're now adding that language for the educational incentive. So again, it affects one sergeant, but it really affects going forward the ability to retain and recruit for the department. Shift differential, the same thing, an extra $10 per week. And then the physical fitness program, which is voluntary, we increased that from $500 to $1,000. Again, big emphasis on wellness. And having people fit for duty and being able to contribute, and we think it saves us on the other end of the equation in terms of lost time and so forth. And then the other final component of the agreement was the parties agreed to basically, withdraw the pending Department of Labor Relations complaint and move forward. So that's the agreement with the superior officers for the period of 23 through 25.
Can I just ask,
Sure.
on the previous one, what does it mean about the person in charge? The officer in charge increases, so
in other words,
explain how that works?
So in other words, on most nights, like most nights, there's patrol officers on duty, a sergeant, and a lieutenant.
Okay,
If there's instances where we can't fill the lieutenant shift because people are away on vacation, sick, or injury or what have you, then there can be circumstances where the sergeant is the senior officer on charge.
I see.
So that's what it's about. It's like, it's the responsibility of being in charge. It's sort of like working that temporary upgrade that you'd
Yeah.
see, for a department head or stuff in a school system.
Okay, I just didn't, that's good. I would imagine that would be a minimal cost.
It is, yeah. It's not.
So is somebody jumping into the sergeant's position then? Is there, or does
No,
that just stay
no.
blank for that
It's
shift?
just blank. It's blank for that
okay.
shift.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I can move on to that's the Superior Officers Agreement. The patrol agreement, we reviewed that previously, did we? Or did we not? I can just go over it real quick.
We might have briefly touched on it, but it
Probably
won't
didn't
hurt.
vote. Okay.
We didn't vote,
All right, the
no.
Patrol Officers Labor Agreement, again, same 3-year contract period. Again, a market adjustment to the wage schedule. So at the end of the agreement, a top step patrol officer would earn just over $70,000 base pay. One of the changes we had is that all new patrol officers are going to be required to obtain and maintain their EMT certification. The prior language we had in the contract had a 50% clause, and we were at 50%, and that created angst in the department, in the patrol part of the department, because if people got promoted or somebody transferred, you were right on the cusp of 50%. So we all agreed, let's just mandate it that any newbody coming in has to obtain and maintain their EMT status. So ultimately, over time, it will well surpass 50%, and ultimately, barring any change, would be every officer. In fact, we were at the Police Foundation breakfast, and they noted there when they gave their outstanding awards about how there were 2 different police calls during this past year where the police were very instrumental in life recovery in terms of the AEDs and support until the paramedics, fire, and ambulance arrived on scene. So again, that's part of the town's public safety efforts. Again, Juneteenth added to the list of holidays. Call-in pay from 3 to 4 hours. This one was sort of an antiquity, because most standard call-in pays for departments are 4 hours. So that's been adjusted for standard call-in. And then the other one, and this was sort of agreed to by the town and the union, and we think it makes sense, obviously why we agreed to it, is in order for a patrol officer to be promoted to the rank of sergeant, we're putting language in that they would have to work in Chelmsford for 3 years. I mean, not that we have a huge amount of transfers in, but I think the idea is we wanted somebody to be assimilated with the culture of the town before we put them in a supervisory position. So that's the summary of the patrol officers agreement. Moving on to public safety dispatchers, the last group in the police station, again, 3-year wage schedule. Again, a market adjustment because here, again, we're competing and having difficult retention. I mean, half of our dispatchers are new in the department, and we're competing now with the regional dispatch facility that is now Tewksbury-Draycott. We also looked at the dispatch wages in Billerica, and then also we looked at Westford because we wanted the third comparable, and the jobs are obviously quite similar. So right now, at the end of the agreement, a top step dispatcher would earn $64 and $373 salary. What we had to do there is we mirrored what the regional facility did. They ended up getting a 2.5% increase in their pay schedule plus $1 per hour for the first 2 years of the contract, because we were behind. And then, again, you've got the shift differential, increasing it from $1 an hour to $1.50 an hour for the second and third shift. Juneteenth, once again, and then increasing the uniform allowance from $450 per year to $600 per year. And then the same with the emergency medical dispatch stipend from $500 to $750. Again, it had been several years since those agreements had been updated along those lines of the stipends. And then finally, with the library employees agreement, what you have here is a summary sheet. There are like 2 pages of grammatical corrections where apostrophes were left out and old language was removed. And what had happened is we had the staff sort of meet offline. They came back with all the language corrections. We agreed upon them. But the essential terms of the contract are a 3-year period. Again, market adjustment for the wage schedule, and 2.5% for the current fiscal year, and then 3% for the final 2 years. And then again, looking at the comparable pays for librarians across, we added an additional 1% only to the top step above the 3% for that second year of the contract, which would be for the upcoming fiscal year. And then once again, Juneteenth. So that's the summary of the collective bargaining agreements. Again, they've been endorsed by the union membership and the select board, and we'd ask your support and ultimately town meeting. How it works is town meeting has to fund for contracts going forward the first year of the contract to ratify the multi-year contract, and then obviously for the one that was behind us, they fund the full amount. So that's how it works.
Paul, do we have the full amounts that are being funded?
Yes, the amount there is the total in the, I thought we had it in.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's
On the
it's
first
page
page,
4,
yep.
it has the first page, yep, as listed.
Perfect, thank you. So okay, so it has the fiscal year 2022, okay, perfect.
Yep.
How many employees do we have in the library union?
18?
18? Okay.
18 employees,
Thank you.
I believe, yeah. And there's a Unit A and a Unit B. I think Unit A is like 6 employees, which are supervisors, and then Unit B is about a dozen.
Pam, just for the record, on the Zoom, we have joined at the beginning of the presentation. Anita, oh, you see them, okay.
Okay.
So Anita, John, and Darlene Lucier.
Oh, good evening, Darlene. Good evening, Nita, John.
Okay. All right. Any further questions?
And then
on-
speaking of Darlene, she did all the calculations.
I'm
on the
sure she
website.
did.
I just wanted to know that, I want to thank her and her staff, particularly the one that went back 5 years. Although it wasn't too bad because they had done it recently with the earlier settlement, so she had the template set up, but it's still a
That's
lot of
good.
work for them
It
to
is.
do, and we appreciate their efforts. And then they got to forecast the next 3 months of this year. Yeah, so anyway, appreciate what she's done.
Oh, thank you, Darlene. All right. Any questions?
I think it's great news to have all that
Absolutely.
resolved. So thank you, everybody,
I mean,
the
I wanna thank everybody,
employees,
too.
the town, everybody.
In the schools. I mean, we've
schools.
seen, unfortunately, some of our neighboring communities like Haverhill and Woburn that had some difficulties. And I will say, and I think it's on both sides, particularly on the school side, they really have, did a nice job, and it's really great, everybody pulling together, because this is a peculiar, extraordinary time, and it's really great. And I think, again, I think the nice part is they now, and as you know, having been on the school committee, Kathy, is they now can then focus on other things for the next 2 years.
That's always good.
So the exhaustion of dealing with the contracts.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. So now we'll continue on with a discussion and vote on the recommendations for those two articles, since we did not, we had the information this evening, and we need to vote on them for town meeting. So I'll move back to Article 1, and either one of you is welcome to.
Well, I think Cindy did such a great job.
Yes.
I defer to her.
So I will entertain a motion for Article 2, fiscal year 2023 operating budget amendments.
Am I ready?
You're right.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 2 as presented.
Have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Any discussion?
I think, just what I said before, I'm glad that this is resolved and,
Well, this is the operating budget
oh, I'm
amendments.
sorry. Oh, yeah, so forget what I just said.
Well, I'm glad the numbers are resolved and we're ready
Yes.
for town
Right,
meeting.
exactly, yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad the money is in the Finance Committee available.
Available to be used for,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the balance of that will be obviously returned to free cash at the end of the year and certified.
No, we'll get you the next special town meeting warrant. We'll get you.
Oh, that's right.
That's all
No, never mind.
Cleaned it out.
Scratch that.
Maybe.
All right. Hearing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. We do have two members this evening on Zoom, so I will ask for a roll call vote. Sam?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Anita? Is that an aye? You've gone silent, but I can see you saying aye. There we go.
Aye.
John?
Sorry. Aye.
All right, that's 7 favor, and I'll say aye, 7 in favor. No against, and no abstentions. And Article 3, I'll entertain a vote for Article 3, funding of 4 collective bargaining agreements.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 3 as presented.
Do a second?
Second.
David beat you. Discussion?
Just a job well done.
Go ahead.
Ditto. Because I can't help myself but to talk, right?
We've never known that, Kathy. No, I'm happy to see we have 4 coming to the table, getting done and being presented at town meeting. And I'm even more thrilled to hear that we have just one outstanding. That's a fantastic job by the town and everyone involved in the unions to get to that point. All right. Any further discussion? We'll do a roll call vote. Sam?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
That's 7 in favor, no nays or abstentions. All right. Moving right along our agenda this evening, we have a review, discussion, and vote on recommendations for special town meeting warrant articles 1 through 5. Let me just open up that document.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee. These are articles, obviously, they weren't known at the time that the spring annual town meeting was signed in February, and some of them are real recent and timely. And so the first two literally happened in the last 4 weeks. The genesis of this is the efforts by the federal government, the country, to home source semiconductor chip manufacturing, because they kind of got a stark lesson during the COVID pandemic of the vulnerability that we have to chip production when the global supply is interrupted. And in our case, we were sort of disappointed in Chelmsford a few years back when Analog Devices announced that they were going to be consolidating to a new campus in Wilmington, and they would be vacating the 3 facilities they hold in Chelmsford, one up in Drum Hill, one at Alpha Road, and one on Elizabeth Drive. And then 4 weeks ago, as part of the efforts to home source, we through Lisa Maroney, our Business Development Director, received a call from the Mass Office of Business Development about a confidential project codename Project Onyx. And basically, now that it's public, we can say what it was, is Analog Devices, which is a manufacturer of semiconductors and has a extensive manufacturing facility at 20 Alpha Road is seeking to apply to the federal funding round at the end of June. And what they need before then is to get incentives, as part of the Make Their Effort Competitive, incentives from the state government and from the local community. So, and they actually had an agent, PricewaterhouseCoopers, sort of facilitating this process. So we immediately notified the select board saying, hey, that something is happening here, and as events transcribe, we'll keep you updated. And then we knew the time was of the essence because, we knew we had a town meeting coming up. We also know that once we leave town meeting, they have to also then go before the state. So they're gonna get on the state's calendar in the next several weeks and then be able to apply at the end of June. And if you may have saw, there was a story in the Boston Globe, I think on Monday this week, about the national competitive efforts, and they cited the Chelmsford facility in that story. So that's, so now the confidentiality is removed, but the deal is here. And so, we were literally exchanging draft documents of the TIF agreement, including the state template, because it's been a few years since we've done one. The most recent one that was executed in town was with Kronos, about a decade, 12 years ago. Prior to that, we had them with Hittite, Microwave, and so forth. So, and we have a pattern, and we wanted to coordinate with the state and get up to speed. And then also we had to resolve the vagaries of it in terms of, okay, well, how many jobs are being created? Where's the investment going? What type of investment is it going to be? What jobs will be retained? And then the ultimate discussion was on the incentives. So with that being said, we have an agreement that the select board signed this past Monday evening. I'm waiting for the signatures to come back from Analog, and then we will actually distribute copies of the agreement at town meetings so that people can, and put it out in advance of town meetings so people can actually see in black and white what it is. But first I want to explain what a TIF agreement is, and that's sort of the next slide. A TIF agreement is a agreement between the town, the state, and the business. There's the location there at 20 Alpha Road. But again, it promotes redevelopment, and provides them with access to the state corporate excise tax exemptions. And the key thing here is the key word is increment. The baseline property taxes on the property continue to be paid and are not, there's no incentive there. What it is on the incremental investment in the facility. So, and that's where the value is. And so what we do is we then work with the chief assessor, Frank Green, and say, okay, Frank, if they're going to invest funding, what does that mean to the projected prospective assessment for the facility? So again, next slide, at 20 Alpha Road, this is Analog Devices Federal, so we're calling it TIF Agreement 1, so not to confuse it with TIF Agreement 2. Analog Devices Federal, and the key word is federal, they're working for the federal government, they're providing secure chips for military operations, it's a wholly owned subsidiary of Analog Devices, Inc. The 20 Alpha Road site, they're looking at an investment of almost $42 million in clean room, manufacturing space, and equipment. In Massachusetts, manufacturing equipment is exempt from property tax or personal property tax, what have you, so that the increment is on the improvements to the facility. The key here is this would retain 207 employees at the site and add 111 employees over 5.5 years. I'll make that typo correction, it's 5.5 years. And the average salary for the new jobs is $60,000 in that manufacturing. More about that site. Right now, there's no expansion of the building footprint. So it's a 71,500 square foot building on 5.63 acres of land. The current assessment is $7.2 million. They currently pay $130,000 a year in property taxes. And so they're basically, of that investment, $22 million was going to go into the taxable area of the interior clean rooms and manufacturing space. In structuring the agreement, we generally would tie it in the step down scale, usually to the term of a lease. But here the facility owns the site. So there was no lease to tie to, but they're making the investment over multiple years and the job creation over 5.5 years. So we agreed that 10 years was the appropriate TIF period. And we did the step down that we've seen in the past on the increment, went from 90 down to 0. And the reason the town does that is it creates an equitable split, but also, and one could argue, well, they get the present value is a little higher. But the benefit of that is as the town's costs increase over the next decade, our tax revenue from the site will increase in step. And so I think that's helpful for the town as it grows, as our costs increase, whether, for operations and services. So the next slide is the real details, and I apologize for the small print. But basically, what you have there is, in the first column is the current $130,000 property tax that's paid there on the $22.2 million investment. The estimated new incremental property tax would total $403,000 additional, and then that gets dispersed over the next two columns. So you can see the exempted column is what is the incentive, and then the incremental tax bill to the town from the TIF results in the final column, which is the total value with pre-existing the TIF and the TIF. So basically how it works out is, over that period, without using present value, you can see the tax benefit is roughly split, 1.87 million to the to analog, and then 2.2 million to the community. And so that's the agreement under Article 1. Again, the goal is to remain competitive. It helps us to continue to market and brand the 129 corridor, to demonstrate that in this case, that Chelmsford can move swiftly, can act in response to the market, and again, prevent, what we forecast was going to be additional vacant space out there. And again, it provides additional property tax revenue, and job creation, which we believe, increases the economic activity for the Chelmsford businesses in the area. So that's, so this is great news, and we presented to the select board. The select board unanimously supports it and signed it this Monday evening. And as I noted earlier, we are awaiting the signatures back from Analog, but everything we have is, at this point we're asking about, well, what date do we put on it? I mean, that's where we're at in terms of the date the select board signed, or the date that shows you where we are now at the completion of the process.
Is that the only property they currently own in Chelmsford?
No, that's the first one. The next article is the second
Okay, I'm
property.
sorry.
At Elizabeth,
I'm the naughty
Drive.
child tonight,
At
okay.
2 Elizabeth Drive is the second site.
Okay.
And those are the only two that they own in town. They also lease space up in Drum Hill, but that's not part of this.
Okay.
That was a different acquisition, which is why that's different up there.
And they're in the process of bidding for this?
Yeah, they're scheduled. They want to submit to the federal funding round that's at the end of June, like the 26th of June or so forth. So we may not know the results of this till later this summer. And again, it's not a certainty either. This is
True.
So we're putting our best case forward. We're optimistic, and
Working together to make an attractive bid.
exactly.
Any other questions? Article
Well,
2.
we'll go on to number 2. Number 2 is we'll call it TIF Agreement 2, and the 2 is synonymous with 2 Elizabeth Drive, Kathy. So that's the location. So so the other one was 20 Alpha. This is 2 Elizabeth Drive. Again, the photo, and the documents sort of mirror each other. But this is the photo of 2 Elizabeth Drive. That's the one that when you go off of Bill Ricker Road, kind of thing, that's the building you sort of come upon at 2 Elizabeth. Again, Analog Devices, Inc. is the legal owner of that nice green, beautiful facility that's out there. Here, the investment is smaller. They're investing $21.15 million in clean room and lab space, furniture, fixture, equipment, and others. Here, they're going to retain 158 employees and add 22 employees. And here, the average salary for the new jobs is $100,000. So this is more of the R&D type of facility where more of the manufacturing goes on Alpha Road. So again, that 106,000 square foot building sits on almost 7 acres of land. That building is in properties assessed for $11.75 million. They pay over $200,000 a year currently in property taxes. So when you look at the $15 million investment into the facility, we do the same 10-year step down of the tax incentive. And then you see the same spreadsheet that Frank Green produced for us for 2 Elizabeth Drive. Again, existing taxes, $213,000. You put the project valuation of these improvements at $15 million. So the new incremental property tax is 279,000, and then you see how it's broken up on that scale, where over that period, they'd get 1.25 million in incentives, the town would get 1.5 million of incremental tax bills, or over that period, we'd get $3.665 million of investment there. So that's the summary for 2 Elizabeth Drive. Even though and why they're 2 separate agreements is the state law and the state require us to have a separate agreement for each property. So you said, well, why didn't you just do them together? They're obviously not going to go one without the other. It's because the guidance we receive from the state is it has to be 2 separate agreements, because the increment is tied to the property. And in this case, it's 2 separate property owners as well, even though Analog Devices Federal is linked to both of them.
Any questions?
Yeah, it's more a comment, I guess. It's just, do we know, are they going to manufacture anything different than what they currently manufacture? Is there going to be any new type of chip manufacturing, or is this just upgrading their existing capability?
I don't have the security clearance to know that. Seriously, Dave, I don't know. We don't get into that level of detail. What I do know is they're putting in a major investment. I suspect the fact that they're basically gutting the insides and putting in new clean rooms, that it's probably a next generation of chips. But I honestly, I'm not going to pretend I don't know, and that's never been part of our discussions. All we know is that it's for the semiconductor manufacturing chips for military purposes. So it's probably not going to power your next iPhone, but it's probably going to power something that goes through the air, or that we know works eventually. But no, so I just don't know, Dave, what the specifics of it. We never, and in fact, I don't think they would even share that. And what we see is a schematic, in which they were very careful of what we put out publicly. I will say that.
Okay.
And so the only thing I did see was it's the same footprint of the building, and they're basically renovating most of the building, but I don't have the details, nor do I expect to ever see the details. And I suspect if there's a ribbon cutting, I'll be standing out in the parking lot, for the details, yeah. Oh, hey, Rod, maybe Rodney's got some details on this. Yeah.
I don't have the security clearance either, but I can tell you that it coincides with what the manager mentioned. Myself and Representative Cataldo, we were invited by the Secretary of Economic Development, Secretary Howe, and they specifically selected Analog because of the work product and the success of the company to expand. And as the manager mentioned, the state did put up $105 million to compete for, I believe it's $39 billion nationwide as part of the CHIPS Act, to become more competitive in the semiconductor. They're also looking at an expansion in Lowell, but in large part, the money is to improve the infrastructure of these buildings that they just can't fold into the product in large part. There is a research and development component both here and at MACOM, and we toured both of those facilities because the Commonwealth feels that they're very good companies. There's an opportunity to expand. There's a labor force within the area. So Secretary Howe was very impressed with certainly the response from the community, as well as the officials, the business owners and the CEO. So it was a good tour. It's enthusiastic. There's more jobs coming, more good paying jobs as part of this, as the manager mentioned. So I just thought I'd try to provide some information. But they're really interested in capturing the semiconductor market rather than competing with not only other states but other countries.
Yeah, well, I think the reason I asked the question is because 90% of just about all semiconductors comes out of Taiwan.
Right.
Okay, and that's a huge risk to this country right now. And that's the whole purpose of the investments that we're seeing out there. And my only concern is that we make sure that we make the right investments.
Right. And that's the intent of the CHIPS Act at the federal level, and that was the intent of the match from the state to show that we're serious to compete for that money, as well as the local participation. That is another requirement, so.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Representative Elliott, if I ask, what do you expect the process to look like after the TIF agreement's been entered into at the local level?
I think, as the manager mentioned, once there is this local contribution, that is part of the application process. The application will be submitted to Mass Business Office, and I think it's very likely that that's going to go through. And the difference between this and MACOM is different, that they make semiconductors to spec, where analog, as I have just learned, is they produce mass quantities of a particular semiconductor. So we feel there is a little bit of time, element, according to Secretary Howe, that we get the applications in to the federal government as well. And that's why we included $105 million in the supplemental bill that we voted about 3 weeks ago.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, good stuff.
What I can follow up on that was local officials, including the select board and us, we were not invited to that event. We kind of learned about it afterwards, which is quite different than today when we were all invited to Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll were at the high school for the Pathways to Improvement grant announcement, which is already online and so forth. So, it really is a secure and limited, need-to-know basis what's going on out there. But as the Representative Elliott noted, this is really an exciting opportunity to and really provide stable employment for the greater Lowell area. This is great.
Thank you. All right. Article 3.
Article 3, and we're going to see Representative Elliott come back up to the podium. This has to do, he's been working with the select board and town officials to address the commercial truck issues on Ledge Road, dealing with the quarries that are out there. And so working with town council and the representative worked with his house counsel and so forth, we've drafted a home rule petition. You can see it's pretty straightforward. It would restrict the weight of motor vehicles along Ledge Road to a gross weight, including load of not more than 26,000 pounds or not more than a total of 3 axles along the roadway. Obviously, that would exclude firefighting, public works, and other public safety motor vehicles along the roadway. And the goal is, and Representative Elliott was here at this podium on Monday night, the select board meeting, the goal is we're trying everything that we can to help the residents out there. And so that's, what this is we'd introduced this legislation, and again, try an approach of sort of, all of the above to do what we can to improve an untenable situation that's out there. And obviously, now that we're back into construction season is resuming, and these dry days don't help the dust and other conditions out there. So again, we'd ask your support. The select board unanimously supported this, and we'd ask for your support as we go into town meeting. If the representative wants to add anything further.
I would just, my question is, once we pass this as a town meeting, then what actually happens with the home rule? What's the process?
Basically, the town meeting authorizes the select board to submit the petition on behalf of the town. So we then notify, with a certified vote from the town clerk, Representative Elliott. We also want our other reps to co-sign on it, Cataldo and Representative Arciero. They will then submit the bill to the House. It'll get assigned to a committee. There'll be hearings, and then we hope enactment on the House side, and then we repeat the process on the Senate side, and then hopefully gets to the governor, and then becomes law. And the couple other slides that were on there just show you graphically the dramatic increase in the truck traffic out there. These were counts that were done by the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. And you can just see the dramatic increase of truck traffic out there to the point where, you've almost got a third of the vehicles on Swain Road being commercial trucks and so forth. And then we put the map for town meeting for those who may not be familiar with the area. I know the members here are. And then the final slide was a photo from a resident out there just showing what it's like, trucks both ways coming down a street that is not intended for two-way commercial truck traffic.
So what would be the preventative measures? Would there be?
Basically, the police department. It would be posted. It would be
The signs
posted,
and
and the police
police would
department
be-
enforcement. Yeah.
enforcement.
And we have the police department out there regularly, because there's issues of speed and safety going on in that area, and so that's what it would be. They would, it would be through the police department. And that's why the two-prong of the weight as well as the axles, because, our police department doesn't have the scales, but we do have the ability to monitor. It's very similar to the off-ramp of Route 4, 495. Right now, that's very now properly marked with the highway signage improvements in the last couple of years. So again, all a police vehicle has to do is see a commercial truck exiting off of Route 4, and then it's pull them right over. So it'll be the same thing if there's calls, and monitoring out there. That's what you do. You just ticket them, and we want to restrict this behavior.
So what is the typical time duration for it to go through the House and Senate and the governor? Is that like years, or is that
I don't
Is it
want
a
I don't-
fluid situation,
well,
or?
the representative can speak to it. It's a 2-year legislative session. We're not going to exit town meeting until the end of April, beginning of May. Then, so we probably submit it to them in mid-May. They're going to be busy from mid-May till they recess in July. So I'm sure the representative's going to do everything he can to get this moved quickly. But I don't want there to be any illusions that we're going to have something out here in mid-June. It's probably going to be the fall, if not, hopefully by next spring, because it's just how the legislative process. I mean, they're up to their elbows, right now, because they have a truncated administration that came in, so they've got the budget started late. They're dealing today with the tax relief as well as the operating budget, and then a whole other list of items on their agenda. So it's a crowded thing, but generally the process will take time to get assigned to committee, and then hearings, and then enactment.
I want to ask a very awkward question, and since I'm being the naughty person tonight, I'll just go ahead and do it. So, thank you for coming and supporting this for our citizens. And I'm just curious if our other representatives are likely to sign on with this. And the reason I'm being naughty and asking is because one of our representatives represents Westford. So wouldn't this make traffic go more in Westford? And would he sign along? I mean, I know you can't speak for somebody, but I'm going to ask the naughty question.
I'll let the representative speak.
Naughty question.
Well, first, forgive me for not coming in a suit. We were in Boston all day, and there was no air conditioning at the State House, so I said, I gotta put on some comfortable clothes. But that's a good question. I will have a conversation with Representative Acero. I've had a conversation with Representative Cataldo, and he's fine. I also had a conversation with Senator Barrett, because as, Manager Cohen mentioned, we do our work on the House side, and then it goes to the Senate, and then, we're keeping our fingers crossed. And as far as the time frame is concerned, that's a good question. It's a home rule petition. It is exempt from what they call Rule 12. After we submit once our session starts, we have 3 weeks to put bills in at the beginning of the year, and that's it for 2 years. Or you can file bills, but it has to go through a different process. So long story short, this home rule petitions are exempt. So this will be assigned to a committee, and it's about reaching out to members to move it along. And I plan on doing that and working. I've spoken to Senator Kennedy about this in Lowell to galvanize some support to move this through the legislature. So it will be, it'll take some work, and you never know what's going to happen. But as I listen to residents, I committed to trying to do something, and this is one way that House Counsel suggested that we do it. So the other option was I could file a bill, but members of the legislature are going to say, why didn't you come in with a home rule, get support of the community, and that gets the ball rolling. So by no means, unfortunately, the wheels of government do not move very quickly, but I'm going to do what I can to move this along and get it through, hopefully, certainly before the end of the session, but then again,
Thank you.
we'll see. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
The question I have is, when's the legislature going to install air conditioning?
Article 4.
Article 4 is, these are two capital articles, and I pleased to have joined with me our Public Works Director, Christine Clancy, who can really speak great to these articles. The first one is for the replacement of the elementary school boilers. She can explain what happened this year to the boilers, how we kept our fingers crossed through the winter, and where we're at right now.
Good evening. I'm not sure, are those slides from Monday? Okay, so the slides, perfect. So the center school boilers, right now we have existing 2 gas-fired hot water boilers, Airco 1.5 million, 1.5 thousand BTUs per hour. These were installed in 2010. Typically, boilers last about 20 years. So in terms of a timeline, we were not looking to replace these, even in the 5-year plan that we place. In our 2016 Doe and Whittier facilities report, they were listed as in very good condition and age. And like I said, it was not proposed. There was no indication at all in the next 5, even to 2030 at least, to when we would be replacing these boilers. Next slide, please. So then in February, just this past February, we had some difficulties with one of the boilers, and a heat exchanger on one of them boilers failed. When it failed, it was combustible and cracked. The combustion forces that occurred in the boiler did cause irreparable damage to one of those boilers. We, at that point, and at least it was towards the end of the winter season, we took that one boiler offline. We were able to keep one boiler running, but really the school does require 2 boilers to operate, especially during the really cold winters, the cold days, run on a lead lag time. These boilers were outside of any warranty parts. We had no warranty. Also, we took this to Airco. There was no reason as to why this happened. There's no reason as to what created this failure in the boiler. So our recommendation is to replace not just the one boiler, but the second boiler. The reason is because it's the way that the first boiler was made. It would be hard just to replace a second one. They really are integrated with control integration. You want to replace both of them. And that's the request for this article. The estimated cost is $210,000, and that is for both the boilers, the piping, the integration into our controls. We still will retain that second boiler just to keep for parts. We do have other Aircos in the school. So it was an unforeseen expense, but it is something that we would look to do this summer in ahead of the heating season, really by October. It's like mid-October, October 10th or so. I don't know if there's any questions.
How is it funded?
So this would be funded, I think it's partially reserve, or it was,
Yeah, 100. It's 100.
150 from the Finance Committee Reserve?
Yeah, for the reserve fund, and 60 from the raise and appropriate.
And we expense that as opposed to, if it was a capital item, we'd go out and...
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna borrow for $60,000,
Right,
so we just expense it.
I'm just saying, rather than being in the capital plan and capitalized over a period of time, we're gonna expense this.
Yeah, this is the type of thing that would be presented to us as a Finance Committee for the Finance Reserve Fund if it happened outside the time of town meeting. So this is the type of thing that fund is used for. So it makes sense that we're using partial funds from the reserve fund to do it. We don't need to do it because we're already having a special town meeting anyway. We're, of course, getting a different type of boiler.
no, actually, we're sticking with Airco. We had the new Aircos.
Sticking with the same one that just failed?
So, well, new Aircos.
7
we
years
did-
before it's supposed to?
We did look into Riello. We looked into some other options.
Who's naughty now?
We looked into some other options because we do have Riello in some other schools. There is more cost with the piping. I would say this was more cost effective, but we still use Airco. Airco is still a reputable boiler. Why this failed, we have no reason. And Airco actually is kind of scratching their head. So we would still look to use Airco.
So, given the supply chain issues that we see all across the board for virtually everything, do they have them in stock? What are their?
I believe it's like 6 to 8 weeks, I want to say. I know we were looking at some other boilers, so, I mean, we'd be able to get them this summer.
Within reasonable
yeah,
time
and some of the piping or valves, but, yeah, we want by placing in kind, we can reuse the pad. We can it's an easier installation.
Oh, good.
Looking at a different type of boiler would be a larger project.
So this is more cost effective.
This is more cost effective, but still using boilers that are, I would say, are reputable.
Is the manufacturer offering any kind of discount for the failed units, and then we have to dispose of prematurely?
So we have to go out to bid. So likely not. I mean, unless we procure the boilers ourselves through state contract, but likely not.
Yeah, okay.
Are these even available through state contract?
Well, sorry, we have to go out for contract.
Yeah.
I have to check. Sometimes we have procured them through Sourcewell, or so we would look, but we go through the procurement to proper procurement to procure these and install them, like I said, ahead of October.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Article 5.
You might as well stay up there. She's going to present on Article 5.
Okay.
So, Article 5 is for the McCarthy Middle School kitchen renovations, and this is also a project. And I actually maybe just jump to the next slide, and we can talk about the appropriation. So this was an FY23 approved capital project, renovations of the McCarthy School, in the amount of $438,355. We are under contract with an architect right now, designer JTA, developing detailed design documents for procurement, and construction is currently planned for this summer. Sorry, am I on the wrong? I just realized I was on the wrong. Oh, right slide. And I will get into detail in the next slide of the additional requests. We are requesting an additional $550,000. And this is largely, as I'll get into the next slide, due to some various reasons. Overall, the costs in materials, in contracts that we have seen in some just recent contracts too with ARPA. So the current estimated construction cost is about $1 million, not the $438,000 that we had appropriated, and that's $545 a square foot, which, based on current construction costs, that is a reasonable cost. You can see costs anywhere from, it used to be, $200, $300. Now you're looking at between $400 to, I've even seen prices at like $700, $750 per square foot, based on, and this really is something that has hit during COVID, and it has continued to increase. We're not seeing an end in sight. So next slide, please. So this, just to elaborate on some of the reasons for the estimated, for a reason why we're seeing this cost escalation. It is an increase in construction industry costs due to materials, limited, so we also have a very limited amount of contractors that are bidding on this. Just recently on an ARPA project, the project was in, I think it was overall from original, it was 70% above our original estimate for an ARPA HVAC installation. It's not just for HVAC. We're seeing it across the industry, particularly in building construction, Chapter 149 projects. And inflation's in that too. Just last year is 8.5%. So that is part of it. We also look specifically at just the equipment, which we're actually just opened that bids today, and we're reviewing those. And we looked at the Parker installation from 2021, which has similar equipment, and just that the same equipment is over 60% just from 2021, which was actually already an increase that was during COVID. So that's a significant amount right there. We also, in coordinating with the health department, we do have to bring some parts of the kitchen up to code that I don't think were originally in the scope. So $100,000 for the hood installation. We have to provide a grease oil water separator, which that is an added cost. I mean, it's just something I don't think was programmed into the original cost. And just overall, I think the scope did grow a little bit. If we want to do this project, we want to do it. We don't want to just swap out equipment. We want to do the floor, the ceiling. So this is a full, I mean, I don't want to say a full gut. We're trying to do as much value engineering as possible, but this will, we shouldn't have to come back to this kitchen for a very long time. So that is the request in the amount of $550,000 in hopes to we'll do it this summer. And as far as we're borrowing under Chapter 44 of the general laws. Any questions?
That'd be a 10-year. Yeah. Any questions? So that's quite a cost escalation from the original amount that was placed in the capital request from a year ago.
Yes.
The comment, as usual, should we be concerned, I mean, should we go back through all the rest of the capital plans for the next year and make sure that we've allocated the proper amount of money?
So-
This is over 100% more
Yes.
than what we planned. That,
Is there a particular, I guess, Dave, to jump onto what you're saying, is there a particular reason for this one being so much of an increase?
So,
I hear you, but no matter what the reason, it is a huge increase, okay, over what we planned in the capital process. And if the capital process cannot handle this type of thing, we need to go back and deal with it. Okay, so my question simply is, should we go back into the next year's capital plan and make sure we've done our homework?
I think the part that Christine was mentioning is, we relied upon the Dore Whittier School study as the basis for the scope of work and the cost estimate for the work. And I think going forward, and we meet monthly with the superintendent of schools, our facilities director, and so forth, and we've had those conversations. We've got to go back, because we know the next one that's coming, and perhaps as soon as this fall, is the high school kitchen.
Right.
Because that's the next one, and we expect, and that's why we're not here talking any further about the high school kitchen at this time, because we agreed to pull the high school kitchen from construction this summer, so we're now going to do the design and detail work for the high school kitchen this summer, and then bid it out over next winter to do it for next summer. So the short answer to your question is yes, Dave, and that's the lesson that we came back to, and we're now going to come back. So when we come back for the high school kitchen, we will have current cost estimates, current detailed scope of work, including, bid results, for equipment and so forth, that we did not have a year ago for the McCarthy project. And I think that's the lesson that we learned.
Yeah, I just want to make sure
you're
I just want to make sure you understand, I'm not attacking this, okay, item. I'm simply saying, I'm on the capital committee, and all these projects come before me, and they all have a dollar figure to them. And the assumption is that the dollar figure's correct. And so that's the only reason I make the comment I do.
Point well taken.
So,
The proposed kitchen renovation, is that virtually identical to what was done at Parker?
it's actually a little, I think the footprint's a little larger. I forgot the square footage. I want to say Parker is a little bit smaller, but it's very similar. Very similar.
Equipment-wise, it's similar.
Equipment, yes, it's a very similar project, and so this project, Parker, I think, was close to, actually it was closer to the 430, so we're looking at double cost. I think for the capital planning for this coming year, we did get updated costs on the elevator, so I know there were elevator recommendations in the 2016 report. We did reach out to some vendors just to try to get some ballpark, so I feel pretty comfortable in those prices that are put forward, and we have 3 that are proposed. And same with the boilers, the Harrington boilers. So I think this is probably the biggest hit, and then we're looking at the high school kitchen. But we also, I guess the bidding environment is also scary still.
Yes.
We are getting swing bids of hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes, and that hasn't. I don't know when that's going to stop. Even on some small scale projects where we go out and we think this electrical work is going to cost $8,000, $10,000, we get a bid for $30,000. So the bidding environment, I think, is still playing into the unknown, but I think, yes, we will refine moving forward, especially some of the kitchen.
Thank you.
Did we say what the source of the money is going to be?
Borrowing.
10-year
Okay.
borrowing,
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah. So is it safe to say we're departing from the Dore Whittier report for further projects in the schools?
No, the Dormitory report is helpful, but we just need to take that as part of the planning and then just add on to it as necessary.
Update for current numbers as opposed to 2016 numbers?
In more detail, that's the thing, is like the hood wasn't in there, the flooring wasn't actually even recommended. So there's things that we need to, And also, I think looking at one thing is looking at square foot cost, and so I think we need to estimate high. And so if you look at that, if you run the numbers on the square foot cost, it would have been, I think, I have it right here. It would have been $243 a square foot, and we're estimating $545. So we
Okay.
know that 243 rate, so it's just, if it was just equipment, but as we got in there, look, the scope grew
Everything,
too.
yeah.
So I think we need to look at these projects to more, I think the door report was like replace the equipment, and that was probably more of an actual cost. But replacing the flooring, the ceiling, the $100,000 hood, the oil, water, grease separate, that adds up quite quickly. Lighting, electrical, plumbing for
I know the
this.
grease issue's been presented a couple
Yes.
times to the select board as well. Those are not cheap.
No.
Would the same equipment be what is used at the high school? I mean, so is there any savings by buying multiple pieces? I don't know.
So we looked into that. Not huge, I don't think.
Okay.
Especially because information is available on the state bid list. So there was some more, if they were doing construction at the same time, maybe, but not just purchasing the equipment at the same time.
And then you run into where do you store it?
And we didn't want to think about storing it. I think some of them have to be stored in an environmentally controlled area potentially. So purchasing both equipment, I think you'd see very little, maybe minimal value. Installation, because that's the thing, if you have electrical, plumbing, you could bounce between two schools, but that's just not an option right now. And I think we need to vet out that design to see what that true cost is. And this we'll see what this actually comes in as. We hope that we're high. We hope that that's the thing, we're essentially, this estimate is based on, between 30 and 60. So I feel like if anything, we're conservative. I hope this is higher than we need, but it shouldn't be less, it should not be more than this.
Okay. Any further questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to a discussion and vote on recommendations for the special town meeting warrant articles 1 through 5. So heading back to the beginning of the list here. I'll entertain a motion for Article 1, Tax Increment Financing Agreement 1, Analog Devices Federal LLC, 20 Alpha Road.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 1 as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I hope this happens. I'm totally in favor of it.
Yeah, it's nice to see
Ditto.
stuff moving forward down on that corridor, especially something like this. I think that was the goal for this type of work to be done and to hopefully keep a good business in town and to expand a business in town, work with them in that process.
Very often a TIF is the price of admission.
Yeah. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call a vote. Again, it'll be a roll call vote. Sam?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
7 in favor, no opposed or abstentions. All right. Article 2, Tax Increment Financing Agreement 2, Analog Devices Incorporated, 2 Elizabeth Drive.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 2 as presented.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Discussion? I think it just flows from the previous. Hearing no further discussion, I'll have a roll call vote. Sam?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
I'll vote aye, 7 in favor. No nays or abstentions. Article 3, Home Rule Petition, Ledge Road Motor Vehicle Weight Restrictions.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 3 as presented.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
We appreciate the effort, Representative Elliott. Thank you very much, and express our gratitude as well to Representatives Cataldo and Arciero for their anticipated support.
And
think-
thank you for coming to the meeting.
I think we'd be remiss if we did not thank the efforts of our own select board and also our town manager in trying to address these issues over the last few years.
Yes.
I'm certainly hopeful that this is something that will be successful, however long it may take, and I'm hoping that there'll be no opposition to any movement in this direction.
Excuse me.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll have a roll call vote. Sam?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
I'll vote aye. 7 in favor, no nays or abstentions. Article 4, Center Elementary School Boilers.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 4 as presented.
Second.
Discussion? I hope these last 20 years.
Here's hoping.
I think we're all hoping that. Yeah. It is nice we'll have a third one to work for parts from at least.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll last longer.
If we have the parts, we can maybe prepare it ourselves. Who knows? Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll have a roll call vote. Sam?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. 7 in favor, no nays or abstentions. Article 5, McCarthy Middle School kitchen renovations.
I make a motion to recommend approval of Article 5 as presented.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I know this looks like a very costly situation, which it is, but I would like to commend the efforts of our DPW director and our town administration for being forward-thinking on this particular situation and not trying to cheap out. So if we do this, we're going to have a kitchen that will last time, and hopefully it outlives me. I don't want to be talking about this kitchen ever again.
Let's hope they cook up some great stuff for the kids there.
Right.
Yeah. I'm hoping it doesn't outlive me, but that's another discussion for the day. No, I understand the need to revisit these numbers. These is a tough market out there, and alone, I think, looking at the equipment cost increasing 60% just from 2021 and our renovations over at Parker, I think it's a huge unforeseen cost. So I think
No reasonable person would have ever expect anybody to anticipate that.
definitely not. I'm also happy to hear that we've adjusted things for the
Yes.
current capital plan, and we're looking at those adjustments as well.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll roll call vote. Sam?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
I'll vote aye. 7 in favor, no nays or abstentions. All right, that ends our votes and review. Let's review the reporting schedule. I see we have the final version, Pam, on that letter and report, on the initial report. Did that go off the printer?
They had already left for the day, the printer, so it's actually gonna start printing tomorrow morning.
Okay. Is there any possibility I could throw in the two ones we voted on tonight for Articles 2 and 3? If I type those up and get those over to you?
Yeah, you wanna just change the letter.
I'll just
book
change
in
the letter
now.
to add in 2 and 3, and we'll add in 2 and 3
Right.
numbers into the book, and that way, all we have to do is a report on the special town meeting. Therefore, we'll have everything in for regular town meeting, and we'll still get it out tomorrow. So I'll when I get home, I'll
Can
make
you
those.
get it to me tonight?
Yeah, I'll add to my list of things.
Okay. All right.
Who needs sleep?
It's good to be the chair.
Yeah.
I was hoping you'd get the withdrawal of Article 21 in there.
Oh,
Yeah, I
that's
think
right.
we'll probably withdraw the language from Article 21 as well while we're at it.
They'll create the
It's a good
space you
idea.
need.
Exactly. Plus, I think based upon our language in that particular one, I think it's best to take it out anyway. Yeah, given that it's been withdrawn. So I'll delete that too. We have no action because it's been withdrawn. Okay. And then it actually will allow me to point out 2 or 3 little edits that I found in the rest of the book that I'll just highlight for you, Pam. As far as the letter for this particular, and the book for this particular, I'm guessing this will be more of a pamphlet than a book, given it's only 5 articles. I don't know. Would we do that here?
Yeah, my thought is we're just gonna pass out the second night, you know, because we're
Okay.
gonna hand out, we'll do it the second night of
Sure.
town meeting when the special is there.
Okay.
That way it doesn't get lost.
I'll do my best to work on the letter this weekend. I should be a quick trip for that one, a much quicker trip for that one, Pam. We all voted in favor. There were no names or abstentions, so there's nothing controversial to add for any of those articles. And then it's just the 5 pieces of information. We don't need to put any of the voting information into that particular pamphlet. It's just the information on the articles. And I'll make sure, I think you do already have this, Pam, but in case you don't, I'll just forward it again, the presentation from tonight.
Okay.
So we'll attach, you know, not the article itself, but the slide pieces into the pamphlet.
Yeah, and you do want your recommendations in it, though.
We do. Yeah, exactly. It'll be a mini pamphlet, but it won't be a book.
Oh, in the
Yeah.
book, yeah, no.
No. Perfect. Okay, and that should be out before Thursday, so it's out a week before special town meeting, which starts, I believe, it's at 7:29 on the 27th. Yeah.
What color is the book, Pam?
I think it's green.
Oh,
Thank you.
we haven't had green in a while.
Very, very important.
Would you
course.
explain that to me?
John's in charge of color.
Oh, did you do it?
I'm really not, but just to explain everyone, so I talked to Red Mill Graphics today, and the color is, I know the numbers are way more important than the color, but it's a fluid situation on the color because unfortunately, like other things in supply chain, they're having trouble getting different types of stock. So I made it known that we're flexible on the color. So
Very good.
That's up
So
in the
it
air
could
right
be
now.
green, or maybe not.
Well,
Just
when
ask
I-
that, we're
when
just
I
not
talked to
repeating
the
yellow
person-
from last
Very
year.
a
but-
shade of green.
Yeah,
be
when
sure
I talked
true.
to the
That's fair.
person, I suggested green, and she said that they would make sure they had green. So I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
I will tell you,
Well,
I will tell you that 19 years ago, when the town had negative free cash, I was chair of FinCom then, and I asked that the cover be red.
I would have asked for no cover.
Yeah.
Let's save on the cost.
That would have been better.
I would have resigned.
Oh, jeez.
You would have.
All right. So this discussion of plans for upcoming meetings, unless there is a need for us in the first 15 days of the next fiscal year to make any adjustments, or approve any adjustments made by the select board, which I don't believe we anticipate, we will not have another meeting unless we have some special situation pop up until likely end of August, more likely beginning of September. So we'll be in our new terms. I know my term is up, I think June 30th. Yeah. Somebody else is up.
Must be me.
It must be,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's 2 there.
There's 2 of us.
We came together.
Did we?
Yeah.
That's right.
What a happy
It's only
time.
been 9 years, Kathy. All right. So, with that, I'll take any public comment, if there is any public comment. In the Zoom room, we still have Darlene, John, and Anita. Don't expect any comment there. I don't know, Virginia, if you have anything to add. Okay. In that case, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's 7 in favor, no nays or abstentions. Thank you. Have a good night. It just got shorter.